when you think yourself as a leader and then you still fail to be a character like a leader?
The leaders have to communicate that purpose every day.
Leaders are not born, they are created. Every question has its own answer. We know that.
I work with two categories. My B2B business is for companies and corporates and startups to help them position themselves, help them grow.
One myth and the challenge that you feel should be unlearned if you are really into an active performance model.
First of all, it's not just the problem of India or Indians for that matter, Ankesh. Globally, obesity crisis is growing.
What you're actually talking about is more very theoretical in nature. So I still believe there are a lot of people who prefer themselves groomed up. One book that changed your life.
I think I would say
Welcome to the Collaborative Canvas. I'm your host, Ankesh Saxena, and today's episode is about performance, but not in the usual way. We're not chasing overnight breakthroughs or quick wins. Instead, we are exploring the power of small, consistent improvements that compound over time. Joining me is Ashutosh Sharma, founder and chief researcher at SYWIL, Spread Your Wings Idea Labs. With a rich career across PwC UK, Putney, and CSC, Ashutosh now works with business leaders, sales teams, and executives to unlock growth through the lens of marginal gain theory, an approach that transformed elite sports and is now revolutionizing the way leadership and strategy is being seen. In this conversation, we unpack how identity can silently hold us back, why high performance often struggle to influence, and what practical habits lead to real transformation. So whether you are a leading team or leading yourself, this episode is helping you rethink your own success, not as a leap, but as a series of well-placed steps. So let's dive in with Ashutosh into the conversation. Welcome, Ashutosh.
Thank you so much, Ankesh. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for flying all the way from London to talk about, the marginal theory. And I'm kind of inquisitive about the fact that when we spoke about it long back, there are very critical elements when you think yourself as a leader, and then you still fail to, be a character like a leader. And before the show, even when we were talking about leaders are not born, they are created. And a statement have gone under detailed over a period of time because everybody thinks that they have got every accomplice in their own self that they can be a good leader. So while we get into this marginal theory in detail, I wanted you to introduce yourself first so people know where this thought of marginal theory came in and what made you, start the SYWIL.
Okay, so I'll talk about my life and we'll kind of connect the dots, Ankesh. So I grew up in a city of Ajmer, and my father was simple public, service or government servant, and I studied in a simple Hindi medium school, and I was lucky enough to get into the NIT Trichy engineering college, and that was the kind of first time I realized that look, there's a huge gap between where I am and where my peers are, in their abilities and performances. I wasn't intimidated by that, but I just realized that, look, Kashu, I need to cover some ground here, right from, learning languages, articulating what I'm, how do I articulate better, how do I, score better in my exams and things like that. So that's probably, I think, the seeds were sowed for, improving myself on few bits. And then, as the luck would have it, I landed up in London, and London then stretched me even, really farther and hard, in terms of developing certain skills to be successful. And I think that when you go to London, one thing that really hits you is that people over there reads a lot, and I ended up picking a habit for reading over there, and started buying books which were helping me solve a particular problem or a challenge that I was facing at that time. how do you pitch for a deal, or how do you respond to a business proposal or an RFP in the market, and how do you articulate, communicate, how do journalists write and things like that. So I read a lot, and constantly sort of improved myself on the finer nuances needed for me to be a successful executive or a successful leader. So that's kind of my story so far.
I think that's wonderful. I mean, considering that, you're brought up in the culture where India, I still believe only 30% of the people actually read books. I've been seeing a lot of reels where it says that, at least, if you really wanted to make it a habit of reading books, just try at least one page a day. Somehow, for me to be somebody who can read books over a period of time, I didn't find that suitable, but I'm not going to question that. I think a lot of people don't read books. For them, it could be a starting point. But considering books gives you a lot of knowledge as to how you can do that. And I would probably echo the fact that, when I traveled around, I really find people are more pro in their, nature in order to tackle certain situations. And very few in India I've seen that they're like up to the mark. I'm sure you must have also seen the same thing when you transition yourself from one country to another. So let's talk about how often these identity being hidden becomes the barrier to success.
So identity, according to me, Ankesh, is everything. What identity you hold about ourselves is the make or break for your career. And the good news is it's a skill. It can be fixed. So, what I say to the, senior executives, MDs in banks and some global banks is visualize what kind of a leader you want to become, at a very macro level. I'll give you first a story or an example, right? Tom Watson, the person who started IBM, right? In his biography, he says there were 3 reasons he managed to make IBM so big. Number one, he was very clear to visualize what IBM will look like, when it has become in its full form, right? What kind of clients, what kind of services, what kind of revenues and all that sort of stuff. And then he said the number 2 is, he says, okay, if we want to become that kind of a company, what kind of systems and processes and the people I'll need. So when Watson started IBM, for someone to join as a sales director, he will take them out for dinner, see their behavior, are they fit for the kind of IBM I want to build? Even their family lives, are they happy people and stuff like that. And then number 3, he said that, look, we then started building IBM like that. So he said IBM was not, we were not doing business, we were building a company. And if Tom Watson can create IBM like that, we ourselves can create the leader, the manager that we want to become. I ask people, a simple method. Close your eyes for a minute and visualize what kind of a person I want to be, what contracts I'll be signing, how I'll be, what kind of a clients I'll be meeting, how that proposal will look like, how I'll be pitching those things, all those things visualize. And there is something even more interesting, Ankesh, what I talk about is micro visualization. Let's say you have got an interview. Visualize yourself a day before or probably a week before every day that you are having a great interview. The person who is interviewing you is just sort of eating out of your hands, and he is totally engrossed and he's just loving your answers. Visualize that. Even visualize yourself that you are answering the question with confidence, pause and impact. And I can guarantee people who are able to visualize that thing and have that identity in their mind that this is how I will do it, success is guaranteed.
Visualization of self reflection is definitely needed. But what if, we say that we read books, we get inspirations from there. What if an inexperienced person who can actually visualize, to again, I'll probably just add to your interview example. When I speak to people, I generally tell them that every question has its own answer. We know that. When an interviewer is asking that question, you really have to pick words would help you understand what can answer be like. But before that, you really need to study your own CV, because answers are actually coming out of the questions are actually coming out of from there. Now, what you say is basically a stage 2 of self-realization, and that micro thinking and micro visualization, where I know that I would do my best into this. But the reason why I'm citing all this is because I'm trying to still understand, when people don't have experience, how can they actually micro visualize?
So they can definitely micro visualize the confident personality and the positivity aspect of it. That look, let's start with what I don't want to be. So our brain is very good at identifying, what can go wrong. So ask yourself, let's say all can go wrong in this interview. So I can get late for the interview. My dress is, I'm not feeling comfortable about it, and I'm really nervous. My palms are sweaty, and I'm like, I'm unable to answer. I'm atak ke jawab de raha hoon, and things like that, right? Flip all of these scenarios, saying, okay, so interview is a week from now, next week Monday. I'm landing up on time, or before time. I'm smartly dressed. I'm walking like, Amitabh Bachchan or Shah Rukh Khan or whatever it is. Tuck, 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 tuck,
The
tuck.
confident move.
Yep. Shaking hands with confidence, answering questions with confidence. Just that fundamental aspect. It doesn't matter. You are starting your job today, and first interview out of your graduation, visualize that confident walk. Yeah. The second aspect is when you're talking about the CV, I agree with you. I mean, the answers lie with your experiences, that you have got,
Over a period of
and
time.
yeah, and even people who are at, I mean, I've interviewed people who are like 35, 40. You can leverage your experience from the project you did at your engineering college, or in your school for that matter. So, and someone who's just starting now and coming out of graduation, they say, "Oh, Ashu, I don't have any experience challenge," and I say, "No. First, stop that barrier. In an interview, it's also about what insight did you take from those experiences. What did you learn? What was the challenge? How did you solve? And that could be sometime a personal challenge. My mother had to go through an operation, and how
But
did I
Ashu,
solve that?
what you're actually talking about is more very theoretical in nature. So if I really have to give a practical experience, what would be, how would I be doing that?
Look, the practical experiences are, let's say, if you're applying for a sales manager job, then you have to be, an interview is a storytelling exercise.
Yes.
You are telling stories.
I agree.
And now you're talking about how you won the deal. What was the challenges there, and how you solved it to win the deal. If you're applying for a role into the operations, then you talk about, I was given this role and I changed it in my experience. The problem was that our costs were very high. Or so I'll give you an example. When in one of my, I was looking after as a delivery director, and when I took charge, the client was looking for like consultants and their CVs. We were winning 1 out of 20. And the reason was we were not just doing a proper screening, and when we were even submitting the
Proposal.
proposal or CV, saying, "Hey, please find attached CV of this person that you asked for," and I stopped it. We started adding value on this. Look, we are submitting CV of James, Richard, or Venkat, but the reason we are submitting is we have assessed him and we found him good in these areas, and that's what it is. And making those small changes in our process made we
Yeah, I mean that's
three out of
basically
four.
exactly that's like very time consuming effort that you've already done, and you're just by sending the CV to the client, you're actually asking them to do the same thing. What if a summary would go out and they can read the summary and then evaluate the CV while the interview happens?
Sure.
So exactly, I mean I think sometimes we really need to dissect the processes in such a way. In
100%.
the introduction we talked about the marginal gain theory, so I'll pull you back onto that question again as to where did you apply that concept and how come you inspired to develop this theory out?
So let me just explain what the marginal gains theory is. And the best way is with the story I tell is the British cycling. British cycling did not win a medal for 100 years. Yeah. Then they hired this guy called Dave Brailsford as their performance coach. So he introduced the concept of marginal gains for British cycling. And what marginal aggregation or marginal gains is, it's not that you improve one thing and you just expect that it's going to just have a cumulative effect going on there. He says, or what aggregation or margin, every aspect of it, we improve little bit, and all of them put together, you become world beatable person. You can beat the world. So what he did was, like in the cycling example, of course, he streamlined the way bicycles were designed and where do you keep the water bottle. He introduced heated, pants and so forth, so that they are able to train for longer. He even, introduced concept of washing your hands to make sure the cyclists are not falling sick. So, you get a common cold or fever and you are unable to train for 2 or 3 days. At that level, if you don't train for 2 or 3 days, you go back a month or maybe 2 months back. So you lose 2 months worth of training because you have fallen sick for 2 or 3 days. The massage, the food, protein and everything, the diet part. So much so that the British cyclists travel with their own pillows and mattresses so that they get a good night's sleep as compared to their competition. And then in Beijing and later on in London, they pretty much won all of the medals. That's the power of aggregation of marginal gains. Tennis stars, that's what they do. Just improving their first serve, reducing their double faults. Food, diet, sleep, every aspect is improved. And they become winning the Grand Slams. Now let's look at it in executive lives. Apply it to not just executive lives, even normal person. Executives, of course, the sleep is important, but how do you start your day is very, very important. How do you run your meetings? Are you able to run meetings better than your peers or your competition if you're in sales? How do you make your proposals? How do you make your pitches? Time management, making sure you're prioritizing the right things. If these small aspects, if you get marginally better than your peers and your competition, you'll be unbeatable at a global level, I would say.
But most of the audience here in India that hears the podcast is basically Indians, and the one age range that I was talking about is 35 to 44. Not everybody is at a certain level, and they work very hard. There are different shifts. How one can going back to your sales wala interview, how can one self realization can be done on them, or probably they can do a self realization by themselves when they barely have time to pull themselves out from the load that they actually carry. So if I really have to go by your experience, the professionals struggle to sell their own ideas effectively because they don't have time. So what would you suggest them to? executives, we understand, we have seen stories, we have heard on in and seen in the books, and you before you sleep, list down all everything that you wanted to do the next day. When you wake up early, do an exercise and blah 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 blah. I've seen tons of Indian who are carrying their bellies and they barely do anything because they're so engrossed with the fact that they have to complete a certain task because their boss is on their head. If I really have to see an improvement in those mid-year, middle level tier group, what suggestion would you give to them?
So, first of all, it's not just the problem of India or Indians for that matter, Ankesh. Globally, obesity crisis is growing. I mean, it's high in the US, a bit less in the Europe. There are sort of shades of it. So, a few things I would say. I would again emphasize on visualization, right? As they say, life is not about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself, right? The visualize what kind of a person I want to look like, how I want to be walking, and what kind of a dress I want to be wearing and look smart. Also visualize your next day. I will be getting up at this time. It probably not happen tomorrow. Next day, I'll be getting up at this time, and start small. It's. I've done 2 marathons and countless half marathons. Did I go out and run my first marathon straight away? No, of course not. First kilometer was a hard work. You just walk. So it starts really small. We were talking about reading books. Literally, just put a book on your bedside, literally on your pillow, so that when you come back, you just read 10 pages a day. And 365, you're talking about 3,650 pages, which is roughly 10 books or maybe more. So it's about reading 10 pages a day, and you can read 10, 12 books in a year. So that I think is applicable for everyone. The second part of your question was that executives, senior people, we get it. But some people are just operators. They're just given, like a robot, they're given a task that this is what they do. Reflect on your task. How does things come in? What do I do? How do they go out? How is the quality assessed on it? And make the one thing that works the best, I would say, is make some checklists. How is the input complete enough? If it is not, push it back to the person who has provided you, saying, this is my checklist. You haven't given me enough the right inputs. How are you expecting me to produce the right output? Push back. And trust me, people will respect you. They would love to work with you, saying, oh, I love working with Ankesh. He's pushing my boundaries and making sure the input qualities are good. So pushing back against what we feel that, oh my God, if I bend backwards, people will love me more. No, people will actually love you more when you push back and stand for yourself.
And which is why those consistent improvement can build a better culture?
Yes, but the leaders have to build that culture, saying, we are in the business of constantly doing marginal gains.
Which means the theory would only work when both the parties are aligned to it. So one is constantly making an effort, another one is like, not interested.
Look, let's look at it, cricket or football, right? I look at business or, small operations. I try to compare it with like a professional playing team. It's an IPL team or a football team, like whatever, Manchester City or Arsenal. There, they are constantly improving, and you would see on the pitch if someone is dropping a catch or someone is not passing the ball right, the rest of the team says to him, either just, they encourage him saying, hey, next time, do well. But a good professional team will also take their colleagues to task for not doing a good job. Yeah. And there is no shame in it. It's done on the pitch also sometimes. You will see, the captain of the team and others also say, hey, no catch dropping, guys, no catch dropping. Everyone, let's focus. It's so important that we push the boundary on the spot, and that's everyone's role as well.
The fact is that, cricket or football, they have goals, and we see that teams are working together. Organizations do have goals, and very few organizations actually, build a culture where everybody is in sync and playing like a team player. There's a lot missing there. What do you think those issues are?
I think getting clarity on purpose is very important. The and the leaders have to communicate that purpose every day. And sometimes I compare bringing up kids the same as being a leader in an organization, right? To your kids, parents all the time are saying, do the homework, yeah, and study now, work hard. Not just besides the homework, please do some revision, try some harder exercises. You don't say, okay, my child is 4-year-old, I've told him do the homework and it will happen. The people who have brought up kids or who are bringing up kids know that reinforcement you need it every day.
Exactly.
Yeah? And the same principle applies in an organization as well. We are here, let's say you're a bank. We are here to make sure our clients get a great experience. They get their money when they call us, when they talk to us, when they use the app. It's seamless. It's less friction. That's what we are in that business. And that as a CEO, as the MD, as the chief operating officer, as the director, senior manager, you got to tell this to your team all the time. And when you do that, people get those messages and say, oh, I'm getting this one wrong. Let me fix this. Let me get a better customer experience. And, it makes an impact. So the CEOs have to, or the leaders have to get bored to death by repeating the same thing again and again.
But actually, most of those do that. And people feel like it's a micromanagement.
So I'm talking two different things. Micromanagement is you are literally, sitting down. Let's say you are a director in a company, right? And micromanagement, I would say, is you are saying, if I say, Ankesh, please do this Excel analysis for me and make sure the column sizes are, the text is rounded. Make sure that the formulas are visible. Please make sure the columns are like this. And then I come and see you in every hour. How is your Excel looking? That's micromanagement. But if I'm driven by purpose, then I just say, look, do the analysis. I don't care what's happening inside the Excel sheet. It's all I care about is I want to know our defect rate. And I want to see defect rate month over month over month, right? How it's going up or down. I want to see it in a linear chart. And I'll just leave you to figure it out. Yeah. And you sometimes, and let's say someone is more junior, get lost in that analysis. I'll just say again, remember, I'm interested in defect rate month over month. Just show me this. And people will get it. There's a possibility the person is not fit for that role, and then probably replace him, give them the role that they enjoy doing rather than what you are asking them to do.
Yeah, you're right. I think with micromanagement, I think it's basically a concept that I believe middle management has taken up very seriously in terms of either they don't want it to work, and if the boss is following up, they believe that it's a micromanagement, or the actual concept which you explained, that going after and checking whether the column size is the same or not. They have two different aspects altogether. But I think the way middle management sees it, that they've been pushed to do certain things. So building a culture, it would not be easy even from the top to bottom if everybody, which you rightly said, is not aware of the purpose. So they have to align onto that. So whatever
100%.
information coming from top to bottom has to be aligned, and that's exactly how we see. Marginal gain theory is part of a sports industry. The way it works there, it doesn't work in an organization.
It, it does. I mean, if you look at the car manufacturing, the whole lean concept is nothing but marginal gains. How do I improve every aspect of my, you know, manufacturing process? How do I reduce the inventory? How do I, Toyota in the old days, if any part is defective, they used to literally stop the whole assembly line, and that would really meant that it's a huge impact of cost. But the whole idea was that let's fix even that aspect of it. Every aspect of assembling the car was improved, and that's how they were ruling the world at that time. Particularly in the Americas, the Japanese cars were got so popular. So it's applicable everywhere. I would say. The only other thing I would say is that the world we are now coming in with artificial intelligence and so many tools available, micromanagement cannot work. You have to give the purpose and let the teams figure out the ways to do it. And as a leader, you cannot be controlling everything. The tools that the team are using today, I can guarantee 6 months or 12 months down the line, they'll be using different tools. So give them the freedom to find the right tools and find the right method, measure them on the outcomes.
Yeah, and for the fact that the way people see overall, the volume of work. I mean, I was just thinking of the example that you said that the boss actually wanted to see the defect rate. Now, if you come up with saying that other than the defect rate, there is other issues that I have identified which is causing the defect rate to go down.
100%.
I think that's where the purpose-driven mindset can be seen, where the culture is building in such a way that you're empowering your junior management, and then you're gaining the momentum on how the building of the business can be done. So I think you gave a very classic way of looking certain things, and there was a very deep dive. So coming from diverse experiences and building spread your wings idea labs, how does it is actually shaping the current work? Because seems like you're full of ideas and you're actually managing the mindset also at the same time.
100%, yes. So the I know my experience has been in diverse as well as various countries. The It was during the pandemic time I realized, Ankesh, that as we were kind of losing people around us, I thought, you never know, Ashu. It might be your turn tomorrow or next week. And I was reading a philosophy book that said men should invest in their craft. And that hit me hard, saying, what is my craft? And what I kind of, I thought about it and I journaled on it, and I wrote about a notebook and a half, reflecting on what all successes I had and what was the reason behind it. I felt it was, I must give it back to my friends and colleagues and so forth. So I started doing it when I was still with PwC London with few of my friends, and they were all giving me very good feedback. So I started Spread Your Wings Idea Labs as a business because I'm full of ideas which I wanted to, which I read or research around, and I wanted to give it back to my companies and friends and colleagues, kind of thing. And I work with two categories. My B2B business is for companies and corporates and startups to help them position themselves, help them grow. And it's the same message, but at the B2C level to executives and people who are in the middle of their career and wanting to grow or accelerate their career. Again, it's the growth part. How do you get a promotion? How do you win a large deal? How do you get a new job? People in between jobs. So diverse, but it is, I can summarize it in one word. It is growth, or I would say accelerating the growth.
So what are some practical habits and routines you would recommend that people can, in terms of getting growth, can measure their own selves?
So I mean, I already touched upon on the executive side,
Yeah.
says, how do you prepare for the meetings? How do you do your time management? How do you make storytelling presentations and the other critical skills? If I can just broadly generalize it, really broadly generalize it, the sleep is important. Reading is very important. And when I say reading, it does not necessarily mean reading a book. These days, it's getting easier. I have no doubt watching a YouTube video. So even if you get interested in a book, I say first go on the YouTube and watch a book summary. Just say what was the name of the book summary of that book. In 10-15 minutes, you'll get to know what this book is about, and then you can decide you want to buy the book or not.
Beautiful.
Audiobooks, I'm just a big fan of audiobooks. So I'm all the time with an audiobook. I'm just looking for moments where I can steal 10 minutes and jump onto my audiobooks. My travel time, my, tidying up my house or my room time. Sometimes I'm just cutting vegetables and things like that. It's audiobook time. When I go for my runs or walks and things like that, it's all on the audiobooks. And then if I like the book, I end up buying the book, and then I'm underlining and things like that. So reading is sleep. I talked about reading is the third thing, which I would say is just routine. Just making sure. You must have heard about Steve Jobs wearing a black turtleneck all the time. You would have seen Mark Zuckerberg wearing the
Black
gray
t-shirt, yeah.
gray and
Yeah.
simple T-shirt, and there's a reason behind it. The scientific reason is that the neurons required to take a multi-billion decision versus deciding what do I wear today is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I read about Mark as well.
So reducing the cognitive load on our brain and keeping those energies available for high value decisions in life is so important. So, and routine brings that. I get up in the morning at this time of the day roughly. I drink water, I do my journaling, I do my gym and my exercises. I leave my office at this time. If you just put those policies or routine in your life, you are, I'm telling you, already in the 10-15% people in the world, on the top of the world. So routine is that much important.
That's true. That's true. I know a few people who prefer to manage a routine in a very successful way because they believe that unproductive work should only be given few seconds.
Yeah.
So when I read about Mark that he used to wear the same T-shirt and the same jeans every day, of course, he's Mark Zuckerberg, the Mark Zuckerberg, so he probably have the full wardrobe around it. The first thought that back those days used to hit me hard, saying that how come people would actually see him the same way, until that information broke out. But the mind always tells the way you show yourself reflects a lot about who you are into the market. So I still believe there are a lot of people who prefer themselves groomed up and prefer themselves to be wearing an attire which makes them more confident. But then they're not Mark Zuckerbergs. So the thing that you just mentioned, again, I'm circling back onto that. If I really have to make it big, I have to come with a cognitive mindset. I have to lower down on those unproductive items which I should not be relying on it. So I think that's a very wonderful example you cited about how the routine should work, and you really have to be very mindful of that, and if you really have to do that. One myth and the challenge that you feel should be unlearned if you are really into an active performance model.
Look, the myth is stories people tell about ourselves, that look, success or leadership comes with 6 feet people who are aggressive, banging their desk, or they are lucky because they have those kind of genes, and that I think is the myth. In fact, research has shown, and the research done on the CEOs who have led companies for multiple decades and delivered, returns better than others, were none of these. They were, very humble. They were more driven by the purpose, and far more open-minded in conversations. So anyone watching this one and thinking, oh, I don't have this and I don't have that, you know kill all those stories in your life, and get your be authentic to yourself, be purpose driven. It gets easier.
Yeah, very rightly said. Before we, do the closing part of it, um, the three rapid fire questions I have for you, because we spoke about books, we spoke about, the practical assessment of ourselves, the self realization, what we should do to become better person in our lives, and how we can develop a better building culture. So, one book that changed your life.
I think I would say Men's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl's book. I would recommend everyone to read. And if you allow me to just talk about that book for a minute, is that Viktor Frankl was in the concentration camp, and he survived that, and because of and he has summarized that in the book. And in one word, I would say is just staying optimistic, that I'll figure out to survive here, kept him, motivated and survive, and he became,
Who he is now.
yeah. I mean, he's no more, but he became a doctor and
that's the name,
research and so forth. Is one book I would recommend. It should probably be mandatory in every school.
And your morning routine in 3 words? I saw a post where you were actually running half a marathon.
So I would say, in 3 words, I would say jogging, tea, journaling.
Wonderful. Journaling. I'm going to do that from starting tomorrow. This morning tea and is definitely one thing that I do very consistently, just like any other Indian. And one myth about leadership you wish people would unlearn.
I think I talked about it.
Yeah.
That myth is that leaders are 6 feet tall, banging the table, aggressive. No, that's a myth. Leaders are, on the contrary, very, very. I mean, I've worked with MDs, and MDs, people rags to riches, hundreds of crores worth of business. Very, very humble. They'll ask me questions. When I was with PwC, they'll say, Ashu, you probably know this better, but I just want to ask you this. And I know those questions are incisive, but asked to me in such a humble way. So, that's the biggest myth, that 6 feet tall, aggressive, banging the table. No.
Works 24/7.
Yeah, I mean, you do find, I would say there are workaholic ones, but they all know how to rejuvenate themselves. They know their body and their brain well. How do they, whether it's sleep, it's walk, or listening to music, or run. For me, running is my recovery method. I find it very meditative. But for others, it might just be music or playing badminton, whatever works for them. But they know how do they rejuvenate themselves.
No, we just had a very wonderful conversation. And the conversation is not just about how small things change your life, but you really have to be self-reflective about it. You have to go deep into this. So thank you so much, Ashu, for taking time out and talking about the big dilemma everybody faces in their work life, balancing is how they can come out with the flying colors. And I think the name in itself suggests spread your wings with Idea Labs. So I hope this conversation with Ashutosh Sharma gave you more than just a food for thought. It gave you a framework for change. And if you're someone navigating leadership, growth, or reinvention, remember this. It's a small shift that compound into big wins. Until next time, keep it collaborative, keep painting new pictures of the possibility, and don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Collaborative Canvas on YouTube and Spotify, because every voice you share helps ripple the insight grow wider. Thank you so much, Ashu.
My pleasure.